Cash-a-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Well, welcome to GeoGearHeads episode 172, where we're talking about mass transit caching, and I'm doing the chicken dance. Well, okay, just me, the bad cop. Now, I'm also here with Daryl W4 and a very special guest. Daryl, will you take the time and the privilege to introduce our returning guest?
I will do that if we can actually get our words out tonight, which I don't think is a guarantee. Well, plus a few extras too.
Yeah, right.
But tonight we are going to be talking about mass transit caching, and who better to talk about mass transit caching than Subway Mark?
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the sandwich either.
No Subway sandwich shops, because that falls into the private property thing and the no commercial thing.
Exactly.
But we are talking about mass transit, so maybe even before we get into the question 172, we should talk about what is mass transit. Mark, can you give us a quick description?
Yeah, so mass transit is anything that moves lots of people. So, subways, trains, buses, light rail, anything that moves lots of people instead of your individual car.
Airliners?
Well, I love airliners, but I don't think they're quite mass transit, although they're becoming more like buses every day.
Yeah, there you go.
Or cattle cars. But
yes,
that means no, like little rickshaws, none of the taxi cabs, and certainly not your personal bike.
That's correct.
But we did ask for question 172 about how you are doing your mass caching, or mass transit caching, and we got a whole bunch of really great responses, but only one person could be drawn to win that prize from coinsandpins.com, and he actually has already picked that prize out, but I haven't had a chance to mail it because he just sent that back a little while ago. So he picked a couple of those state flag tags from coinsandpins.com. But Mark, who was that, and what did he send in?
Well, first I think I'll say what he wrote. So he says, I wish I had used mass transit to cache, but haven't had the opportunity. Although he has found a cache in a bus stairwell, so I guess that counts. So congratulations, Axeman22, you've won it.
Congrats. And we did get a lot of people who said that same basic thing, that they wish they'd had a chance to go mass transit caching, but they're in smaller towns, more rural communities, something to that effect. But hopefully we'll get some good tips for them tonight, and maybe even some locations to go visit. And one of the common refrains that seems to have come up is people love to mass transit cache while on vacation, because then they don't have to deal with any of the traffic or the parking, and it ends up just being a lot cheaper in most cities.
That's correct.
That's exactly right. Hey, in the Q&A, Limax added another form of mass transit that I have to admit, now I've done this. It's talking about ferries.
That's that's true.
I didn't think Tinkerbell actually could carry many people.
Just well, once you're sprinkled with the powder, she just pulls you along.
The boat floats.
Right, I forgot about the powder.
Yeah, a little pixie dust.
That makes it really handy to get over those nasty creeks and
that's
up
not
and down
what
the
we're
hills.
talking about.
Oh.
We're talking about ferries, as in boats that carry cars and people. It's a bus on the water.
That's true.
A bus that fits more buses.
Yes, exactly. Now, I have used, in fact, there is a cache, a multi-cache, where one stage you have to get the information on a plaque on the ferry boat. So you've got to make sure you get the right ferry to get the information. You can take the ride over, do some caching on the island. And I've done that, ridden over on a ferry, grab caches right around the ferry dock, jump back on the boat, and rode back. So I've done mass transit caching.
And you think in Washington State, with all the ferries, you'd have lots of chances for that.
Exactly. It's really pretty easy. So we also have more email, because apparently more people than just me have done mass transit caching. So this was from Lynn Skog via email. I made almost all of my geocaching by mass transit as bus and subway. I live in Stockholm, Sweden, and we have a great subway system here and many buses. In the center of town, we have many geocaches, so it's easy to plan your day. It's also possible to go find a few caches before work if you want to. I'm on my way to go find a few caches right now as I begin working later today.
And
So
I'm going to Stockholm in mid-May, so that's kind of exciting. So I'm going to be using the buses and the subways to get around.
I was going to ask if you'd been there.
Not yet, but that's something. I will be there next month.
Nice. Will you come back on and tell us how it was?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, and Limax, who did the Q&A a little earlier, also wrote in, and he said that he's done a bit of mass transit caching. There's a series of caches that are near the light rail system in the Silicon Valley. I've only done 3 of those. Also, anytime I take BART into San Francisco and happen to do some caching while there, I'm technically caching by mass transit. Well, I did ask him, because we kind of talked about this earlier, the Bay Area is kind of known for its high prices and congestion and everything else, so I figured that would be a lot easier. And Limax did reply that it is definitely the case in certain areas. I think most of the fun I had finding a cache via public transportation was during the Bay to Breakers a few years back. I took BART in to do the race, and then after I finished the race, I found my 500th cache near the finish line. That is really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. Yeah. I did the one in Silicon Valley, which is VTA Santa Clara Light Rail, and they do have a nice series along the light rail stations. And then BART, there's lots of BART-centric geocaches at many of the stations, but unlike light rail, which you could get a day pass, BART is a on-off system, so it's easier to do BART if you're doing a park and ride, because otherwise you're going to be spending a lot of money getting on and off the train constantly to get their stations. Gotcha. No day passes there.
See, and there's a good tip, is make sure before you start these that you know how that fee structure works, because if you're expecting a day pass and you have to pay each time, it's going to be a lot different.
Yes, it is.
Geocaching suddenly gets expensive.
Very expensive.
Very.
But he did supply links to each of the 3 series for the BART, so we'll include those in the show notes as well.
And I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed that whole idea of BART hasn't taken off in other areas of California. Like, I'm thinking of Fresno area rapid transit. It just hasn't taken off, and I don't know why.
Well, you know what? Fresno's bus system is called FART.
Is it really?
Yes.
See,
Fresno area rapid transit.
See, that's the joke I was making, and I assume they didn't actually do that.
Yes.
Well, there we go. See, the truth is stranger than fiction.
Very true.
Well, let's move on to Team Pugash's email.
Oh,
I
it's
used
a
to go
gas.
caching by mass transit all the time when I first started caching. We lived in Boston back then, and I didn't have a car. There was a great series that is now gone of caches at T stations. The T is Boston subway system. Due to muggles and the rule of no caches near active tracks, this series is no longer. Taking mass transit gets you to places you normally don't go or while on vacation. While I went to Frankfurt, Germany, we rode the subway and the buses to get the geocaches. Sadly, we DNF'd all 3. Next time, I will translate the cache page to English before heading out the door.
That's usually helpful.
And stop there and say, "Excuse me, can you read this? Can you translate this for me?"
Now, there is a quick correction from Doug Jones, who says it's VTA, not BART.
Yeah, VTA is this light rail system in Santa Clara, and BART's the heavy rail system in San Francisco.
Really? What does VTA stand for?
Valley Transit Authority.
Oh, okay.
Santa Clara Transit.
See, I learned so much.
I'm a geek, if you can't tell.
It's hard to tell.
Well, I've
normal.
been on the public transit in Boston a couple of times, all of them before geocaching, so I haven't really tried it, but I always love running around in Boston because it is one of the most confusing, screwed-up cities to navigate in their mass transit system isn't any better than trying to navigate the street system.
But the street systems all go one way, and they all go the way you don't want to go.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But I
true.
loved walking around and taking the subways and that kind of stuff. I just had a blast doing that for a couple of days when I was much, much younger and before the selective availability was even turned off.
You just have to go back now.
Yeah, I do, but now I'm not going to find it as fun because I actually would want to go somewhere and have I got to go find those caches. So the thing was navigating Boston was kind of like caching was at the time. It's like we got to find this attraction. How can we get there?
Exactly.
It was kind of like trying to find a cache.
There you go.
On a bigger scale. And we actually got another comment from Limax in the live Q&A. I went geocaching in the Boston Common, which I took the T into.
That's Central Boston.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, we have more email because we're not going to stop there. Excuse me. This one is from Billy Robson. It says, I've done some geocaching in London on the tube. In London, that's the only way to get around. You're basically within 2 blocks of each station. I bought a 15-pound tube pass, which allowed me to travel on the tube for 2 days, finding geocaches. Most of the caches I was going for were virtual and earth caches, which, in a large city, that's easy to do because you don't actually have to go retrieve the log and sign something and try to put it back looking stealthy. You can just sit there and stare at a plaque and nobody cares. Okay. He goes on to say, I just got back from Cologne, Germany, where I did some caching on public transit, but not as easy as London. They do have one neat public transit system, or one neat public transit form for which there is a cable car across the Rhine River from the zoo to the spa. And yes, there are caches on each end.
Yeah, I haven't been to Cologne, but I've been to London, that's the oldest underground railway in the world. So that's where it all started, as far as I'm concerned. And it's definitely easy to get around. And they actually have a couple of geocaches that are at entrances to the underground that have long since closed, since at least before World War II. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I love the stories about the tube systems that have been closed down, the stuff that was used as air raid shelters in the war and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
But that cache on the Rhine River, the 2 on either end of the cable car, that really sounds like it would have been a cool one to do.
And then after you see the animals, you can get a manicure or something at the spa.
Oh, there you go. Well, I think it's the other way around, don't you? You want to get a manicure before you see the animals.
Oh, that's true. They like to see you all pruned up.
Exactly. You look
Well,
more like food.
The next cacher, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this name right, but I'm going to try Tavia. Emailed, said, yes, I have cached by light rail in LA, California. I buy a day pass for $5 and look for caches near the stops. I like not having to worry about parking or being stuck in traffic. There was one cache I couldn't grab because of muggles, so I went to the next stop to cache and came back to the one that I couldn't grab after 20 minutes. If I was driving, it wouldn't have been as easy for me to come back, and I would have had to make a second visit.
Very true.
How true it is. Well, the Bear also wrote in. It says, I've used public transportation several times for geocaching. One was using the Toronto subway system for geocaching. The other one was in Washington, D.C. I wanted to explore both cities, hopefully not on the same day, and driving either city was a big pain in the rear, Washington being especially horrible. Both cities are great to explore on foot, though. I used to use the subways to get from places I was staying to the various places in the cities I wanted to go. I explored way more city than I could have just using my feet, and I didn't have to get into a murderous rage quit over traffic and parking.
That's interesting words.
I can see the Bear doing that, actually. Okay, in either city, the subway is way cheaper than any single parking lot fee anyway. Walking is the best way to explore a city, and I definitely do it again. Interesting side note, in Washington, D.C., I was with my family, signed up for the Hop On, Hop Off bus tour. We used the subway to get downtown by the National Mall and started the tour. I took full advantage of the hop on off aspects as we drove by geocaches. I saw a lot of the city from the bus, and my 4-year-old loved riding on the top of the double-decker bus. Highly recommended way to go. Technically not public transit, but I had the advantage of getting information from a tour guide while we were on the bus, which is something you don't get from your typical bus driver, or something you usually don't get in your car either.
True.
I have links to my blog for my 2 trips in case you want more details or pics from the adventure. So he includes those links. And Daryl, I assume they're going to be in the show notes?
Of course they will be.
Of course.
Yeah, Toronto I've been to, but that was unfortunately before geocaching, so I need to get back up there one of these days. But DC, my church choir has figured out that I'm also a transportation geek, so I help them. We went to DC in 2008, and I helped them get around via the metro. But the hop-on, hop-off buses are kind of nice, though, because they go through all the tourist spots, and usually there's geocaches, or at least virtuals by tourist spots, especially in DC.
Nice.
Well, I was just thinking, there's so many virtuals in DC. This really sounds like a great way to do it because it's just hop on, hop off, grab all the virtuals, and be done. You don't have to worry about all that time trying to find parking and pay for parking and all that kind of stuff. So it really does seem like a much, much better way to go.
Exactly.
But it's this is a lot of what we're hearing in these responses is that mass transit is really a great way to geocache on vacation. And Jim52 chimed in that he has cached using mass transit. He was spending a week in New York and used the subway system to cache there.
Yeah, my 2500th find was actually in New York, and it was I especially saved it. Go figure. It was a mystery cache called the New York Subway. And you had to figure out what lines to use in this puzzle, and I figured it out and worked with the cache owner because the cache would disappear. That's a problem with New York City caches. They tend to disappear. It's a big city. People get freaked out by geocachers sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I did find that, and then again, my church choir this past year went to New York, and guess who helped travel plan and how we got around the city?
Who was that?
Maybe me.
Oh, hey.
But I also would use the subway to get to a park it's called Forest Park in Queens, and there's lots of nice caches there. So that was kind of fun, and that was all by subway.
Well, talking about New York City and their kind of paranoia, which is not unfounded, don't get me wrong. Wasn't that the city that Cartoon Network had set up the LED signs that they put over the walk and don't walk signs and got in big trouble back in...
I don't know. Maybe.
Now I have to look that up because that was a big scandal and everyone was all in arms about it.
Interesting. I don't know about that. Now we have more email. Did we mention we got a lot of feedback on the show? Mark, you're incredibly popular.
I guess so.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go. We got an email, and I hope I don't pronounce the name right. I'm looking at Vince O. It could be Vincio. Who knows? Well, I'm sure that person does. And sorry if I mispronounced it. I tried twice. They say, here's my own experience about geocaching with mass transportation. I tend to use this method a lot when on vacation in big cities. Metro and buses are the most convenient transportation modes, and I often plan the geocaches I want to go for according to the stations nearby. These transports are fast, cheap, and their network is dense. It also happens, on occasion, that I found a geocache in train stations while waiting for the connections or in airports while on transit.
Right, I did go and look it up, and actually Dan Camp also came up with the correct city
that would be
in the live Q&A. Very good, thank you. It's actually Boston that had the bomb scare in 2007, and it was Aqua Teen Hunger Force promo. So they had these LED signs that were made up that people thought were bombs. Because, you always have little LED animated characters waving at you that are trying to blow you up.
That's right.
Tick, tick, tick. Oh, sorry, that was a different movie. Yeah, I mean, people overreact, but I understand that. Mark, I'm hearing
Yes.
a lot of people saying, hey, we did this, and I would go and get off the bus or get off the train and look for a cache. Is it worthwhile to plan out your day saying, hey, I'm going to take the red line or, bus number 6 and look for caches along that route and plan those out, save them to your phone so you know exactly what you're doing? Or is it usually dense enough you can play it by ear?
It depends on the city, obviously, but New York is not very cash rich, so you probably do need to plan it ahead of time. Some cities are very, very rich with caches, and the bus lines or train lines can be very dense on top of that. So then you can just search area. But I tend to be a planner, so I like to know where I'm going before I go.
Very good.
Well, we'll probably get into it a little bit more, but we talked about those bookmark lists too, and a lot of times you will find that the bookmark list exists so that you know, okay, this is all the caches I can find off this line. So if you're doing those hop-on, hop-offs, those bookmark lists will come in handy.
That's a really good idea. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, some people have already done that, and they're already there. So just find one.
I'd rather reinvent the wheel.
Well, let's move on to Lefric H, who wrote in. My wife and I were in Cancun during the summer of 2012 for our honeymoon. Just prior to our wedding, we had been reintroduced to geocaching by a cousin from Germany that was visiting us here in Oregon. We had signed up with a geocaching account in 2009, but after 15 or so, we had sort of forgotten about the sport and become engrossed in our wedding planning. Our cousin really opened our eyes to how evolved geocaching had become and the fact that there were caches all over the world. Just for fun, we looked at a map of Cancun. I was really impressed to see that there were a lot of them there. I made up my mind at that point to see if we could find any of them when we got there. The tourist area of Cancun is a long, skinny strip of sand shaped like the number 7. It is crowded with hotels and resorts, each competing for a view of the turquoise waters. One of the easiest ways to travel the many miles of the Zone Hotelera is either by taxi or bus. We chose the bus. Our hotel was at the north end of the zone. I had saved a number of caches to my Oregon 400 before we left the States. I was not sure what kind of internet or cellular connection we would be able to have, so it was important to do our homework ahead of time. We jumped on a bus and headed south to the end of the hotel zone and got off the bus to look for the Flash Flood cache. I searched and searched, but found myself only willing to walk into the mangrove swamp so far due to the crocodile sign near the bus stop. I was digging through a pile of trash, really gross trash, that had washed off the roads and down a culvert. The entire time we were being eyeballed by a local police officer holding a machine gun. After about 15 minutes with no luck, I felt I had to move on. I didn't want to alert the police officer or the crocodiles of my presence. So Goldie H and I jumped on the next bus, and it took us a few blocks north to the ruins of Maya City at Del Rey. This is awesome. It was a small fishing city and had been empty for 1,000 years. All that remained of the dwellings were stone foundations, but it wasn't too difficult to imagine the great architecture. This area was covered with iguanas. I mean covered. They were everywhere. Some were as large as 4 feet long and would hiss at you if you walked by. Most of them moved out of your way. We began looking for our next geocache amongst the piles of iguana droppings. We finally made the find for I'm going to butcher this and I apologize. La Cora de Paradise.
Does that mean iguana drop-ins?
Yeah.
Because it has paradise in there, I don't believe so.
Oh,
the droppings of paradise.
Maybe La Coutura is something like bacteria.
Ooh.
So, it's a bacteria paradise.
Sorry.
Sorry. And jumped on the bus to head on to our next find. Evening was upon us as we got off the bus at our next stop. The cache we were now searching for was somewhere along the edge of a hotel, somewhere in the bushes. This was not an easy find, though. As the darkness settled in on us, we eventually gave up and began to walk back to our hotel along the sandy beach. That is when we saw it, a pair of shining eyes reflecting from the light of my flashlight. At first we thought it was a seal, but then as we approached, we were able to make out the bulk of a giant sea turtle as she humped herself upon the beach. We watched her for a couple of hours as she dug a hole and deposited her eggs. Then a student volunteer from the local university came by, and we were able to help him collect the eggs. That made for one really awesome day. We continued to take the bus into town the rest of the week, looking for geocaches whenever we could, but nothing compared to that first day with the ruins, the iguanas, and the sea turtles.
Does the sea turtle eggs count as a geocache? I mean, they were hidden by somebody, and he probably was first to find.
No, but it was buried, so it couldn't be listed.
Oh, yeah.
As long as it wasn't snakes.
Why did it have to be snakes?
Exactly.
Well, you know what? That answered my question of do you plan ahead? But now they're out of country, so you don't want to rely on a cell phone when you're going out of country. So having a GPS is good. You want to make sure, though, you're allowed a GPS in that country you're going to, because some countries, think we're all spies here in America, and they say no GPSs. So.
Well, heck, in some countries, even having radio devices like radio slaves for your camera is illegal.
Right. So, check that out before you travel. We want you to keep listening to the show in your comfy chair rather than a prison cell. So, but if you're in prison, go ahead and listen to the show anyway. We like you. More email from somebody who I really hope is not in prison. This is Bryling. He's from my neck of the woods. He says, in May 2013, I was staying at the Mall of America in Minneapolis and wanted to keep my geocaching streak alive. Since I was carless, I got up early one morning and hopped on the LRT, light rail transit.
Correct.
Okay. To go grab some caches before my conference started for the day. It was a rainy morning, but I needed my find for the day. Sounds like an addict, doesn't he? He is a bit of one. I rode 3 stations out, hopped off, and headed to the nearest cache, right near the American Boulevard LRT station. I made short work of that find and headed to the next closest LRT, American Boulevard. That's GC2V2J, for those that are interested. As I approached, the rain intensified, and I could hear thunder nearby. After a short search, I gave up and headed back towards the LRT. While walking back, a very bright flash and bang meant a very close lightning strike. Fortunately, I was not the tallest thing around. I continued back to the station, the nearest shelter, and saw and heard a couple of other lightning strikes in the vicinity, further away than the first. After just missing an LRT train, I decided to walk to the next nearest station, Bloomington Central, since there was another cache there. Fortunately, there was no more lightning close to me. Unfortunately, I had another DNF. I was out of time for my morning adventure, and I drowned rat by this point anyway. I headed back to the hotel in the Mall of America. I had enough time to take a shower, which I think he already did, and change into warm, dry clothing before my conference started for the day.
Wow.
Wow.
Lightning, I wouldn't be caching anymore, by the way.
I don't know if I'd get into a train with lightning strikes that close.
Especially an electric train?
Ooh, well, it would be electrified at that point.
Well, yeah, it's definitely an electric train out there. I did actually do some of the LRT caches out there when I was at the GeoCoin Fest, and I believe the Mall America is at one end of that line, and there's 2 different lines that were open at the time. I think they were actually working on another one.
Yeah, there's 2 lines now. One goes to St. Paul, and then the other one goes to Mall of America from downtown Minneapolis.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And it has 2 stops at the airport.
That's correct. And I was actually flying back from Europe, and when I fly, I tend to load caches in my connection cities just in case I have layovers. And this time I was flying back from Europe, and I had a 5-hour layover in the Twin Cities. And so, since it's right there at the airport, I hopped on the light rail and went to Minnehaha Park, which is a geocache for the light rail there. But there's also that park there, which was beautiful. But it was early spring, so the snow was just barely melting, and the ice was just starting to melt on the falls in the park. So it was gorgeous.
Nice.
But he had to dig for some of the caches because they were under snow.
Ooh. Well, for anyone who is interested in a little bit about that, about the transit system out there, the GC Doc actually put together a couple of videos, so we'll link to those in the show notes. But Bad Cop, and actually you might be interested in this too, Mark. IHAM actually has gone to the last several block parties by mass transit. He says it's much easier than trying to find parking.
It's very true. Actually, I was at the geocaching.com headquarters in mid-March, and we took Amtrak from Salem up to Seattle, and then we relied on Seattle Metro buses to get around, and that's how we got to geocaching headquarters.
Well, and I believe both of you are going to be at the block party this year.
That's my plan.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be there.
You have less of an excuse than most people I know, Chris.
I know. It's, like 40 minutes away.
Well, excuse me.
Really?
Mark, you've done a bunch of mass transit caching. Can you kind of give us some of those that you've done? And, of course you like mass transit because you're Subway Mark, but kind of give us an idea of how that worked for you.
Yeah, so I've been to 19 countries in my geocaching history now, but only a few of them I haven't geocached in via mass transit, like Mexico and Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, and Colombia, and Israel, because they don't really have a mass transit infrastructure. But you go to Europe or you go to China or Japan and Singapore, they have lots of mass transit. So I take advantage of that anytime I can get, because I really don't want to drive in foreign countries if I can avoid it, and transit's just the easiest way to get around.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, a lot of people have been saying, they don't like driving in the unfamiliar cities, dealing with the gridlock, dealing with the traffic. So that's a great way to do that, and it ends up being a lot cheaper because you don't have to pay for the parking. You just have to pay for the gas and rental cars, maybe even. But you don't have to pay for all that extra stuff. You just have to go and get the pass and hop on and off. But that's a great question, is what about getting the pass and paying the fares?
Yeah, so that I always go on the transit sites websites before I go, typically, just to make sure I understand the fare structure and the route structure. A lot of systems in the U.S. particularly, like light rail systems, are honor systems. You buy a ticket from a ticket machine, and then you can hop on and off for like 2 hours, or some of them have day passes, which make it easier. But some systems get very complicated where you have to pay on and off. There's all different types of ticketing systems, and you really have to understand that. One of the nice things about some systems, like London has the Oyster card, and Seattle has the Orca card, and they're prepaid fare cards. And you buy this card. Sometimes it's $2, sometimes it's free, and then you just load money on it, and then you don't have to think about having a wallet full of cash anymore. You just tap this card to a reader, and it says, okay, you paid your fare, and you can board the train or the bus, and just makes it much easier. And some of them, like the Oyster card in London, which makes it even nicer, is if you hit the maximum fare for the day, it's turned into a day pass automatically. So you can keep on riding the trains in London at that point without worrying about paying any additional fares.
Very cool. I know a lot of cities will have special passes too for tourists, so they're not necessarily available to the general public, but you can get like a weekend pass that's available, for a discounted rate. Limax also said in the live Q&A that San Francisco has the Clipper card, but that works on both BART and VTA.
Right, correct. And it also works on Muni, which is the light rail and bus system in San Francisco. And for Muni, you can actually load that Clipper card with a day pass, which will get you on the cable cars, light rail, and the buses without a problem.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yep.
And you're saying this is less expensive than renting a car and going to. I mean, if you're hitting a lot of stops, it's going to be the cheaper option.
Well, the cheaper option because it's definitely cheaper than renting a car, and then you have to park that car. And city parking rules can be really crazy. You know, oh, can I park on the left side? No, it's right side today. Or there's no parking at all, and then you go up to a garage and like you want $40 to park the car? No, thank you.
Yeah, it can get really nasty. I mean, you know, a lot of the planning for what works in what cities. I've always gone just to the website for that transit authority, and gotten most of the information I need straight from there. And in some cases, you can actually purchase those tourist passes right from the website, so that you know you've got it when you get out there.
Exactly, and there's even some systems where you can buy your pass on your phone, and your phone is your pass at that point.
Which is great until you lose your phone. But if you lose your phone, most of us aren't going to be caching very much either.
Yeah, you better have an extra battery too, because if your battery dies and you're on the train and the fare inspector comes, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Really, it's on my phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you turn it on? No.
Well, on a side note, Amtrak's actually using iPhones now as their ticket takers, and they're just scanning the QR codes, or I don't think they're using QR codes, but it is a 2D barcode. So that was kind of really weird when I took the train to Chicago a little over a year ago, almost 2 years actually, because I'm holding up my iPhone and he's scanning my iPhone with his iPhone.
That is kind of bizarre. No more punch-in tickets on Amtrak.
Nope. Actually, let's talk a little bit about the planning for the route, because we mentioned a little bit about the bookmark lists and even just going and doing some manual stuff. But what do you find actually works well when you're going to go caching by mass transit?
So I happen to be a big GSAC fan. And GSAC, you can pull it through the API. You can set your own boundary conditions of what caches to pull. I do that mainly because if you try to do pocket queries by route, geocache and PQs don't understand how to use transit. They want to use roads, and transit and roads don't always jive. So if you really want a tight distribution of caches, the PQs won't exactly work. You can do a general one by pocket queries, but not specific. But GSAC, what I do is I actually have GSAC's map open next to Google Maps, and Google Maps has you can actually select it where it'll show the transit lines, and so I can try to mimic that on GSAC as much as I can, and it works relatively nice. It's nice when you have a dual screen computer, so you can do that though.
One thing I will say about pocket queries is, the routes that it's generating, because it's still a little bit weird, because you have the route that's generated by the route tool, and then the pocket query is actually still generated from the pocket queries tool. So the route tool that they have only does the driving directions, but you can still upload a GPX with that route, and you can do some searches. And in many cases, you'll find people have actually created those routes for the mass transit systems, so that you can use that to do your searches. And all you have to do is search by whatever name or route that the train or the bus or whatever it might be, monorail, could be using, and you'll be able to just turn that into your very own pocket query and set your own criteria. So that's just a matter then of how far do you want to walk. Set your distance and your terrain and difficulties, and you're ready to go. And I would imagine, I haven't actually gone and looked for it, but I would imagine if it's not one of the created routes, you can probably go and just do a Google search for whatever line it is, GPX file, find it and upload it yourself and do it that way.
Yeah, it would probably work too. Yeah, but when you do plan your routes, though, you might want to think about the frequency of the bus or transit line you're caching off of, because you don't want to be caught. A lot of lines could be every 10 minutes, could be every 20 minutes, could be every 2 hours, or maybe it's once a day. You don't want to be caught hanging.
Yeah, definitely. And I imagine that there's some concerns too about, if you don't know the city, are you getting into an area that's not someplace that you want to be with, caching gear?
That's true too. That's why it's always nice to be on a route that runs like every 10, 15 minutes. So if you get off and really feel uncomfortable, you have eight minutes for the next train to show up. So you don't want to be caught 2 hours like, oh my God, I'm in hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're caching with the mass transit stuff, really the smartphone is a really important tool because not only are you finding your caches with that in most cases, and we talked about it many times before. In the cities, I find that the phone tends to be a lot better. Leave your Wi-Fi on though, because if you don't leave the Wi-Fi on, it's not going to be any better than a GPS getting the refractions off the buildings. But yeah, I find that the cell phones work better to get the location because of that added correction of the Wi-Fi. So you get better reporting, and you can turn on your street view or your satellite view and get a better idea of where it actually is, because you'll be bouncing around sometimes, more than a block away. So you're navigating kind of by those landmarks on the satellite. But also, there's some resources available on your smartphone, like apps to help you navigate the mass transit systems.
Yeah, there's one great one. I used it when I was in Seattle last month. It's appropriately called Transit app. It's available for the iPhone and Google phones or
Android, yeah.
Androids, and it works. It works really well. It works in many U.S. cities and in some foreign cities. Although you'll need data plans for foreign cities because it always will be very expensive in Germany or something like that. But what is really nice is it'll give you real time. You'll look where you are right now, and it'll say, oh, there's a bus stop a couple blocks away, and the next bus is in 10 minutes. Or you walk 2 blocks another way, there's another bus up there, and you also can say, well, this is where I want to go, and it'll give you which routes you want to go, and it'll tell you where to exactly transfer. And in Seattle, in a city like Seattle, they actually have the buses have GPSs on them, and it pulls that information of exactly where the buses are. So when it'll tell you a bus is actually due in 2 minutes, and the bus will be there in 2 minutes. Unlike a schedule where a bus could be there in 2 minutes, it could be there in 5 minutes.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is impressive, and it worked great in Seattle, and I know Portland uses it and such like that. And this transit app just pulls this information straight from the API of these transit agencies.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'm gonna have to go download that.
Yeah, it works. It's free, so it's even better.
Oh, that fits my budget.
Yeah.
Well, are there any other considerations that you can share when they're caching by mass transit?
Yeah, so, well, if you're caching by subway, that's usually you don't have any GPS connection because you're underground. So that's something to think about. So you do need to know which stations you want to get off at, not looking at your GPS. And then when you do get out from underground, your GPS may take a little while to reacquire, especially if you're in a city like New York City, because that was a big pain in the butt with all the tall buildings and such like that. Your phone may work a little bit better in the cities. I think we already said that. The other thing that I have found, especially on electric, like light rail with overhead wires, and you're also in a steel cage of a train, GPSs and phones, GPS accuracy may not be that great. Matter of fact, you may even lose connections because you're in a steel box surrounded by electrical fields. So when you get off the train, it may take a while for your GPS to stabilize again.
Nice. So we've talked about a couple of cities that it makes it easy for mass transit caching. Give us some of your best examples of cities that are friendly to this concept.
Sure. So as we already talked about the Bay Area, obviously San Francisco, but San Diego, they have 3 lines down there, and someone's put out geocache series on all 3 lines, and they're all within 1/10 of a mile from a station stop. So that's pretty nice, and the trains run pretty frequently. We spoke about New York. It's a great transit system, but steel canyons have another problem with that. Seattle's great bus system. It does have a light rail system, but actually the buses work much better than the light rail for that. But then there's cities like Denver and Salt Lake, and then there's the old streetcars in New Orleans. The best way to get around New Orleans is by streetcar. And then we could go on and on. Go foreign cities, but 2 cities I haven't been to geocaching wise, I'll be there in September, so I can report out, is Houston and Dallas. So a looking forward to that.
Nice.
Is there one of the foreign cities that you've been to which might be an exceptional city for caching?
Germany, any city in Germany, because they're crazy geocachers in Germany. But Dresden has a great tram system that goes all over the place, and I spent a lot of time in Dresden, and lots of good geocaches. And it goes. You think you're in an urban area, but you get off the train, the tram, and you walk a couple blocks, and you could be in a forest preserve, and there's caches down this nice hiking trail.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
And the trains
really
run well
good.
in Germany.
Yes, and they run on time.
Yes. Unlike France.
We don't talk about France. they might be on strike.
That's true. They like strikes.
Yes.
It's a national pastime.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all this and being here to kind of give us some new ideas for mass transit caching. Boy, I'm getting tongue-tied.
Hopefully it was helpful for the viewers.
And the
It was
listeners.
helpful for me.
And listeners.
Well, it's time to get your question 173 ready. Get that email going to geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com, and in the body include your geocaching.com screen name with the answer to question 173. And that needs to be the title of your question or of your email too, which is question 173. And the question, of course, from what language does the word kayak originate? Have that email to geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com by April 22nd at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Ironically, that's also the next patron hangout, by the way. If you have the right answer, we'll drop your name in the hat for another prize from coinsandpins.com.
Daryl, you mentioned kayaks, and I just watched a video today where, apparently kayak is such a long word, they've shortened it to simply yak. And
Interesting.
I consider a yak to be a large animal.
I was going to say, I don't think I would want to try floating a yak at all.
Yeah. I'm going to pick up my new yak. I said, I don't know what you're getting. You could be getting a boat, or you could be getting an animal.
I went to high school in Nyack, so you can take a kayak to Nyack.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Or no yakking in Nyack.
That's true.
Are there yaks there?
It's in suburban New York, so I don't think so.
No yaks and Nyaks. Okay. No. Well, I always tell you what a good job Daryl does of scheduling our hosts. And just to prove that, let me toss out some of these upcoming shows. April 23rd, we're talking about kayaking with the land monkeys. Or they could be yak monkeys after this. Who knows? April 30th is our randomized 33 episode, and we're going to have the geocaching vlogger on that episode. May 7th, we're talking puzzles, and this is number 3, because we've done 2 other puzzles. They're very popular. And this will be with Cully Long, author of How to Puzzle Cache. And really, are you going to get any better advice than that? He wrote the book on it. May 14th, Gear for Your Bike, number 2, with Dano of Team Pugach. You're going to want to listen to that. Finally, May 21st, we're doing our 34th randomized episode. So get those questions in, because, you got a good chance of getting your questions answered on those randomized shows.
Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Offenauer and Daryl Wanberg. This show is copyright 2015 by Daryl Wanberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with the Cachemaniacs.